With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us again this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, the long-term drought plan for the state water project is published. We'll have details on that. But our top story today, June 4th is the deadline to apply for the September trade mission to Vietnam. USDA Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs, Alexis Taylor, says there are opportunities for more specialty crops.
Products like cotton, dairy, dried distillers grains for animal feed, fresh fruit, poultry, soybeans, and tree nuts really were some of the leading categories. But I think there are increasingly some exciting opportunities as we also work on the market access side of the equation for our specialty crop producers. We're also working on a priority of opening up the Vietnamese market to U.S. stone fruit, so things like peaches and nectarines.
Though delegates will be in Vietnam, there will be opportunities for meetings with ag leaders from other areas as well.
Whenever I'm in another country, I always meet with government counterparts and work on trade policy issues, amplify maybe challenges or new opportunities that we have bilaterally in that market. But the real focus is for those businesses as we set up those business-to-business meetings. I think we will see a really great delegation from the United States, from the food and ag sector, and we're excited and working hard to set up really qualified, reliable partners for them to meet with on the importer side. We are also bringing in buyers from across the region. So we will be in 2 cities in Vietnam. We are going to both Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, but we will bring in buyers from Burma or Myanmar, Cambodia, and Thailand. So we're not only tapping into the Vietnamese market, but really expanding our reach regionally as well for those businesses that join us.
The trade mission is September 9th through the 13th. Applications are available through the USDA website. We've put a link on ours, agnetwest.com. The inaugural awards associated with USDA's Regional Agricultural Promotion Program were recently announced by the Agriculture Secretary. Rod Bain reports.
Recently announced the first round of USDA Regional Agricultural Promotion Program award funding.
I'm pleased to share that this funding will go to over 60 partner organizations that will help build demand for U.S. farm and food exports in high potential markets around the globe.
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack discussing RAP with reporters. Further breakdown of the first round of RAP funding includes:
in November, the Foreign Agricultural Service began accepting applications for the first $300 million of RAP funding. We'll be funding hundreds of projects encompassing a wide and vast variety of products and markets.
It was also last fall that RAP was announced by the Secretary.
At that time, we authorized $1.2 billion in Commodity Credit Corporation funding to help American agricultural exporters diversify their footprint beyond traditional and established markets. We've long been a global leader in food and agricultural exports, but nearly 60% of our exports go to just 4 markets: China, Mexico, Canada, and the European Union. And as we've seen in recent history, there are devastating consequences if we rely on just a few large markets.
And while Secretary Vilsack acknowledges remain commitments to established ag export customer bases globally,
we're also setting our sights on new growth opportunities in places like Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, where opportunities are significant and where U.S. exporters may not have yet established a firm foothold. These are part of the world where the GDP is rising, middle classes are expanding, urban populations are growing, and retail food systems are becoming more modern. All of this, we believe, creates a demand for greater variety of high-quality product which the U.S. can produce.
This first round of RAP funding awards also provides an emphasis on opportunities in African markets, as $25 million was set aside
at a minimum to fund activities in Africa, which has some of the fastest growing economies but the lowest level of U.S. export market investment of any region in the world.
Examples of RAP project first round funding include
building demand for U.S. meat exports in Africa, to promoting U.S. olives in Latin America, to knocking down trade barriers for Hawaiian coffee in Japan.
And the Secretary believes RAP should remain a popular program based on interest in the first round of grants alone.
Stakeholder interest in RAP was evident and overwhelming. We received over $1 billion in project proposals for the $300 million that was available in funding.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
One expert says this year's unusual planting season could make for an unusual growing season. Gary Crawford has more.
In most corn planting seasons, growers seem to get almost the entire crop planted in just a couple of weeks. But this year,
we've spread things out over 4 to 5 weeks this year.
And USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says this could have some implications when the crop enters the delicate reproductive stage, because
this is not going to be a 1 week deal or a 2 week deal for corn. It's going to be spread out all over the place. So we're going to have an extended period of time where we will have to be concerned about crop reproduction.
But maybe this is a good thing.
If we have, say, a brief hot spell, it's not going to do considerable damage like in a year where we had everything going in at once. But at the same time, if we have a protracted hot, dry spell, that could be a concern for the crop because we're going to be looking at a much longer window than normal for this reproduction.
Especially for corn. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
In today's National Spotlight, the first federal forecast for this year's Atlantic hurricane season indicates the possibility of a record number of named storms. Rod Bain reports.
How much of a chance is there for an above-average hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin this year?
There's an 85% chance of an above-normal season, a 10% chance of a near-normal season, and a 5% chance of a below-normal season.
That's Administrator Rick Spinrad of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, providing the recent outlook for the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. So what does that 85% accuracy rate translate to regarding the amount of tropical storm and hurricane activity?
Forecast for named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes is the highest NOAA has ever issued for the May outlook,
with a forecasted range of between 17 to 25 named storms. Between 8 to 13 of those storms predicted to become hurricanes, and a range of 4 to 7 named storms elevating to major hurricane status, Category 3 or above. So what are some of the factors behind this forecast?
The official CPC forecast indicates a 77% chance of La Nina forming during the August-October timeframe. We know the development of La Nina can lead to weaker easterly trade winds and below-average vertical wind shear in the tropical Atlantic Ocean. This type of environment can be more conducive for tropical cyclone development.
In addition, record warm water temperatures are reported for much of the tropical Atlantic Ocean.
Forecast modeling indicates that above-average sea surface temperatures are predicted during the peak months of the Atlantic hurricane season from August to October. Warm sea surface temperatures are an important factor in rapid intensification of tropical cyclones to major hurricane status, and that major hurricanes contribute significantly to the measurement of ACE, the accumulated cyclone energy, ACE.
And why ACE measurements are significant when it comes to forecasting Atlantic hurricane seasons is because
in past years when we've seen high ACE numbers, those have historically been the years with the most destructive hurricanes. And this season, NOAA is forecasting the second highest ACE for our May outlook.
Opposite climate conditions and La Nina factors are found in the Pacific Basin, which USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says is reflected in the 2024 tropical system forecast for that region.
Pretty good likelihood that we'll see below normal activity,
with National Weather Service forecast indicating there is
a 60% likelihood of below average tropical activity in 2024 in the Eastern Pacific Basin.
The official Eastern Pacific hurricane forecast calls for 11 to 17 named storms, 4 to 9 hurricanes, and 1 to 4 major hurricanes this year. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That's today's National Spotlight. Now here's John Hareth with the Livestock Report.
All sectors of the U.S. red meat export business gathered in Kansas City for the U.S. Meat Export Federation Spring Conference. USMEF Chair Randy Spronk, a pork producer from Minnesota, says the industry has a positive outlook for 2024.
I think there's optimism. I'm a pork producer. We've come through a very difficult 12 to 14 months. There's a return to profitability here, so very much an optimism. You look at the first 3 months of this year, volume's up 6%, value's up 7% here. There's still continued demand here. One of the interesting statistics that was pointed out here today that, we've expanded the sow herd in the United States over the last 5 years, and really all that expansion has gone towards exports. So very favorable for what we do within U.S. Meat Export Federation. I think everybody in the beef side's looking, well, when are we going to start retaining heifers? And so a lot of discussion and opinions on, whether that's occurring right now or when that's going to be able to occur here, because that's an important aspect to think about here too.
In his remarks to the attendees, Spronk voiced a need to prioritize market access.
When we look at those countries that we have free trade agreements, we lower tariff and we lower non-tariff trade barriers. U.S. products they maintain access because of their healthfulness, because of their taste, because of their cost effectiveness. American agriculture is good, but we do need a level playing field. And I think that's the position we just need to keep verbalizing in agriculture here. We look at the past when Korea and Colombia, two phenomenal markets that we've just shown continued growth here. We need some new markets here. I'd make reference to Vietnam. Vietnam could have been within TPP here. They're in CPTPP. We're on the outside looking in here. We're at a tariff disadvantage on our products that go into that country at a time frame when they could really use our product. Philippines would be another example. So just great opportunities for continued free trade agreements, and we just want to make sure our administration and our Congress hears that.
For more details about the USMEF Spring Conference, please visit usmef.org. For the U.S. Meat Export Federation, I'm John Harris.
The Livestock Conservancy is dedicated to protecting endangered breeds of livestock and poultry in the U.S. Lori Boyer has more.
Conservancy Senior Project Manager Charlene Couch talks about the importance of preserving the legacy of livestock, which is what their organization does.
The Livestock Conservancy is a national nonprofit organization. Our mission is to prevent the extinction of endangered breeds of livestock and poultry, especially those that have been in our country for hundreds of years in some cases. The Livestock Conservancy is, I think, in its 47th or 8th year, and it came about during the 1976 bicentennial when organizations were planning to do reenactments and to show off the historic and heritage breeds that would have been on farmsteads, and they weren't able to find those breeds. So our work is really centered around helping farmers with education, with marketing and promotion. We do a national census every year of all the endangered breeds of livestock and poultry that we monitor.
Endangered species such as Clydesdale horses and Tennessee fainting goats, popular on TikTok and Instagram, are on the conservation priority list for 2024. Graduating some species off this list marks a significant milestone, as the goal is to reduce the number of endangered species, recognizing their historical significance and purpose.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with today's AgNet West headlines, here's Brian Sherman.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture is accepting applications for the Organic Certification Cost Share Program. USDA's Farm Service Agency will cover up to 75% of organic certification costs, capped at $750 per category through the program. Organic producers and handlers must apply by October 31st. Eligible expenses include application and other related fees, as well as inspection costs. Payments for expenses from October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024 will be made as applications are approved. The initiative's part of a broader organic support package announced by Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, which also includes the Organic Market Development Grant Program and Organic Transition Initiative. Applications can be submitted to local USDA service centers or through participating state departments of agriculture. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service is one of the key agencies working to keep unwanted pests and plant diseases from entering the U.S. Executive Director of Policy Management for APHIS's Plant Protection and Quarantine Program, Matt Rhodes, highlights how the Agricultural Quarantine and Inspection Program works and the types of coordination it takes to safeguard American agriculture and natural resources from invasive plant pests and animal diseases.
Our focus is on excluding harmful invasive animal and plant pests and diseases. That includes diseases like African swine fever and plant pests like exotic fruit flies. Our goal is to intercept and keep out any foreign pests and diseases that could impact U.S. agricultural, natural resources, and ultimately that impact trade and commerce. We work closely with Customs and Border Protection to jointly carry out the AQI program. CBP has staff and inspectors at over 200 U.S. ports of entry. APHIS also has a presence at ports. We have 16 different plant inspection stations strategically located around the United States to inspect imported products, to keep an eye on everything that's coming into the country and ensure that if pests are present, if we can find them through inspection, that we can mitigate them or ultimately refuse entry of imports if that's the best option we have to protect the United States.
The California Department of Water Resources has released its first comprehensive long-term drought plan for the state water project. Despite recent years of adequate rainfall and reservoir levels, the plan aims to ensure continued access to clean water amid increasingly severe droughts. Key elements of the plan include modernizing infrastructure through the Delta Conveyance Project to capture and store more water during high-flow events, exploring additional water storage opportunities statewide, and planning for drought salinity barriers in critical areas to protect water quality. Additionally, the plan advances forecast-informed reservoir operations and improves seasonal forecasting to enhance water supply management and flood protection at Oroville Reservoir. It also invests in environmental resiliency through habitat creation and restoration projects. The long-term drought plan consolidates previously scattered information into a single public report and will be updated every 5 years or after major droughts to ensure continued adaptability. The UC Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program has awarded $80,000 through its Small Grants Program. 8 projects out of the 33 applicants were selected, each receiving up to $10,000. In the planning category, Fresh Approach will develop a GIS mapping tool to help socially disadvantaged farmers access sustainable markets. Growing Hope Gardens will create a manual to replicate urban food gardens in low-income communities. For research, Stanford University will study cover crops in Salinas Valley to reduce nitrate leaching, while UC Cooperative Extension will investigate how kestrels contribute to pest control on farms. In education and outreach, EAT will assist disadvantaged farmers in Riverside County with marketing and direct sales. Agroecology Commons will support marginalized farmers in the Bay Area with training in regenerative agriculture. UC Cooperative Extension will enhance farm signage for Southeast Asian farmers in Sacramento to boost direct sales. And Farm Discovery at Live Earth will provide organic produce and education to food-insecure families in Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay. The grants aim to support diverse stakeholders and enhance agricultural sustainability. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
Common misconceptions about dams. That's coming up on This Land of Ours.
Let's talk about dams.
Anytime I get to talk about dams is a good day for me.
James Denby is National Dam Safety Coordinator at USDA. He'll be talking a lot about dams this week, especially this Friday, the 31st, National Dam Safety Awareness Day. He says there are many misconceptions about dams, such as how many there are. Most of us would guess maybe a couple of thousand. Wrong.
The National Inventory of Dams has about 90,000 dams.
Now, you'd think most of these dams would be owned by the federal government. Wrong again.
Only 5% of those are owned by federal agencies. The majority of dams are privately owned.
But most people think the government is responsible for inspection and maintenance of those dams.
Primarily, the owner is responsible to make sure that their dam doesn't fail.
Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. What is the Nextile Design Challenge? Chad Smith tells us about the contest designed to spark innovation in the soy industry.
The Soy Checkoff recently engaged students across the country to create the next great innovation in soy-based textiles through the Nextile Design Challenge. United Soybean Board Director Carla Schultz was a judge during the challenge and talks more about it.
The future is very bright, and one of those spots that we went to is that college university student, right? They have so much innovation, they have so much going on in the future, and what they could create could be something monumental, no matter the commodity, but especially in the soybean industry. I believe as a director and a farmer, we have the role to make sure that we keep those markets open and that we grow new markets. And what better way than in that fashion and textile arena? Sometimes we don't even think about, right? You're not thinking soybeans, clothes, or any type of design, but we're looking into that. And it was a great new challenge for us in the soybean industry and for the universities.
Schultz talks about how the Soy Checkoff plays a role and her experience with the event.
It was great to be a judge. And I think it meant even more to me as a farmer as I'm putting that seed, just like you mentioned, in the ground. And what is that going to turn out to be? This challenge just is one of those new challenges, like I said, in the soybean industry and for universities alike. And I think it's exciting for everyone, consumers, farmers, that we can find products that are made with soybeans themselves in a retail arena that we shop at every day.
The Soy Checkoff Board wants to see the Nextile Challenge continue to grow into the future. Schultz shares more about the finalists' designs and winner Cassandra Wright from the University of Arkansas.
So we currently had 8 submissions, and we'd like that to grow. We saw very very exciting feedback from the universities themselves. And we think that soybeans can be used in the textile industry even more as we looked at applications even as upholstery, textiles as clothing. Someone submitted even a backdrop for restaurants that contain soybeans. So using ingredients that you would never even think. And I also think about the winner from University of Arkansas, and it created a moth-inspired design that talked about life and sustainability. And how great is that to bring the farm back into that everyday life using soybeans?
Learn more about the Nextile Design Challenge at ussoy.org/Nextile. Chad Smith reporting.
The avian influenza outbreak in dairy cows has revealed a critical vulnerability at the intersection of animal health and public safety. Todd Gleason reports on how a set of North Dakota State University scientists have assessed the federal response to the latest outbreak and what else they believe might help contain H5N1.
H5N1, also known as avian influenza or bird flu, is causing issues within poultry flocks and dairy herds. The disease also infected one dairy worker earlier this year in the United States. Although transmission to humans has been fairly rare, it can happen and is the reason the CDC, HHS, and USDA have taken this latest outbreak seriously. Now, the revelation that the dairy cows can contract and spread H5N1 has broadened the scope of the disease's impact, writes 3 North Dakota State University researchers on the Farm Doc Daily website. It has raised fears of another possible pandemic if the virus adapts to transmit between humans more efficiently, which it hasn't, and that's the view of the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The move of H5N1 into dairy cattle caused a swift response from U.S. government agencies, including USDA and HHS, or Health and Human Services. And while the researchers believe the policy response has been robust, within the dairy sector providing financial assistance and biosecurity, there remain key issues of concern. These include how quickly diagnosis of an outbreak can be made in poultry flocks or dairy herds, and the inconsistency of farm or state-level implementation of biosecurity protocols because of cost or logistical complexities, all of which hampers containment efforts. Now, the NDSU scientists write in the article that the economic and health implications of these policy gaps are significant. They note delays in diagnosis and variable biosecurity can lead to greater spread of the disease, increasing the cost of the containment and mitigation. And in their view, from a public health perspective, ineffective containment and biosecurity can increase the risk of zoonotic transmission, posing health risks to farm workers and the wider community if the virus adapts to more efficient human-to-human spread. To address these current gaps in the response to avian influenza outbreaks in dairy cows, they say a comprehensive strategy that encompasses improved funding, surveillance, international collaboration between Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and innovative research is required. And that all takes taxpayer funding. I'm Todd Gleason.
What are some of the trends reflected in the Agriculture Department's latest monthly look at grocery store prices? Rod Bain reports.
Among the trends noted within USDA's latest food price outlook issued pre-Memorial Day weekend.
From March to April, we saw grocery prices rise by 0.1%, and these grocery prices were up about 1.1% from this time last year.
Economist Megan Schweitzer says this reflects relatively slow growth, below the historical average growth for grocery prices.
And then our forecasts for the year for 2024 are for grocery prices to rise by 1.2% compared to 2023.
No change from the previous month.
So our forecast has really stabilized at that 1.2% over the past few months, and that's really being driven by relatively flat food-at-home price growth that we're seeing.
As coming out of Consumer Price Index data. This is despite only 5 of the 15 food categories tracked in the Food Price Index registering month-over-month price decreases.
Of the 15 categories that we track, we saw prices rise for 9 of the categories. Prices declined for 5 and stayed the same for 1 category from March to April. And so over the month, we saw prices fall for eggs, fresh vegetables, poultry, other meats, and non-alcoholic beverages. And then we saw prices rise the most over the month for fats and oils. That's both oils and butter and margarine, as well as beef and veal, and for fish and seafood. Those are the categories where prices rose the most this month.
Schweitzer does acknowledge the total flat growth in grocery prices does mask some variation across categories. For example, eggs, which experienced volatile price changes in recent months.
We did see egg prices decline this month by about 4%, but that was following up on 7 straight months of price increases. Egg prices are actually still down about 9% from where they were at this time last year, but that was a point where egg prices were pretty high still from the initial avian influenza outbreak.
A closer look at other food price categories by product indicates
beef and veal is a category where we've seen more price growth in early 2024 here, particularly in the past 2 months. That's being driven by really tighter beef supplies coupled with ongoing consumer demand for these products, and so that really helps to push up prices. There are a few categories where prices have fallen over the year. You have fish and seafood, you have dairy products, and pork.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This is the AgNet News Hour. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's this week's Almond Update.
Today's specialty crop news brought to you by the Almond Board of California. You can find them online at almonds.com. We've got Julie Adams with us today, Vice President of Global Technical and Regulatory Affairs at the Almond Board, talking about a recent funding announcement from USDA that should provide some good opportunities for the almond industry. And so, Julie, let's just start out with a little bit about what this recent announcement was.
Absolutely. We're very happy that USDA recently announced allocation of funding through a new program that they launched this year, the Regional Ag Promotion Program, or RAP. And basically, this is focused on building demand for farm and food exports in markets around the world. And so Almond Board submitted an application against the first tranche of funding, and we were successful in that application.
Yeah, that's exciting news to get on board with a new program like that. And there were some markets that were specified in the application that was submitted. So what's the Almond Board looking at that's going to be part of this program and this funding support?
Well, this program really leverages opportunities in new regions. So specifically looking at Africa, Latin America, South and Southeast Asia, really where we see a lot of growth occurring. And so some of these are regions the board has not been as extensively involved in. So with our application, we looked at the opportunity to expand what we're doing in India, which is of course our largest export market, but also to see how we could accelerate and operationalize some of the new opportunities that we identified through the Deloitte market assessment study that was concluded last year. And really, it's going to help us look at targets and new strategies to expand existing consumption of almonds, but really look at what are those growth potentials for the future.
And I understand that Turkey is also a market where there might be some opportunities for almonds. And so what are some of the efforts focusing on Turkey and how to potentially grow the market there?
Well, Turkey's been a growing market for California almonds, and we've been working very closely with USDA, Foreign Agricultural Service in that market, and identifying industry partners who are working to expand consumption of almonds. And it's a market where you see a lot of nuts and dried fruits, both packaged as well as bulk sales. And so we've recently had one of our staff in Turkey to look at some of the market opportunities and meet with trade. And what we're hoping is with our funding through the RAP program, being able to do a bit more in terms of a market assessment and looking at how we can actually start to establish some programs and activities in the market to grow almond shipments.
And now you mentioned the Indian market, which I know has been a pretty big focal point with some of the changing demographics there and market possibilities that opens up. But can you elaborate more on what this RAP funding will be helping with as it relates to the market in India?
Well, right now, what we've been doing, India, of course, is such a key focus in terms of shipments and investment by the board. And coming through the market assessment study that we did, it was one market that was really identified as having significant growth potential. So what we're hoping to do with these funds, we've already started to look at how we can expand consumer activities and start moving into second and third tier cities, but also are there some new growth options related to innovation and ingredient in the market as well. So with the RAP funding, our application included a number of different opportunities that we identified in several markets. What we'll be doing now that we know what the funding levels are is we'll take that back and work with our committees and board to really look at how do we most effectively incorporate that funding into some of the activities that we want to start moving forward on this coming fiscal year.
Yeah, it sounds like this is quite an undertaking, and there's quite a bit of work taking place with a lot of different segments of the Almond Board working together to move some of these initiatives forward, correct?
Exactly. I mean, we've been really looking at markets holistically. So market access to be able to actually get the product in with the fewest obstacles possible, ensuring that there are not technical barriers or issues that make it difficult to expand, leveraging our nutrition research investments to really benefit consumers. And then, of course, foundational is having a complete consumer program that leverages advertising, PR, and research to really grow confidence and demand for California almonds. So we're really working across a number of different program areas, taking a holistic approach and looking at how we create as much synergy as possible in all of these countries, because we don't look at a country as just a single year investment. This is about building for the short, medium, and long term. And that's the thing for our industry. We want to be sure that we can sustain demand going forward.
And now getting back to the support being provided by the RAP program, how is that funding going to be dispersed and, ultimately applied in some of the Almond Board's efforts?
Yeah, the way the program is established, the funding is available from about June 1st, 2024, and can be expended through September 30, 2029. So what we'll be looking at is, given the funding level and the activities we have underway, do we want to expend this in a shorter time frame, or how long do we think we want to utilize the funds? So if we've got reasonable programs and activities that we can start utilizing the funds against in a shorter period of time, then we'll certainly do that. But at this point, really what we're looking at is, what are we planning to do now? How does this funding help support current programs, as well as what are some of those activities we want to start accelerating in some of these markets based on the study coming forward to the board as we looked at those market opportunities for growth. So I think what we'll be looking at really is, how do we allocate in the most effective way with the programs we have, with the way some of these countries are positioned and ready to take that investment in the most effective way. And that's one thing at the board. Through the committee structure, we really have a pretty robust way of evaluating markets and doing research to ensure that where we're spending budgets are going to have the best return possible for the industry. That's what we'll be looking at now.
Well, very good, and I'm sure we'll be keeping tabs on some of those efforts as they get underway. And now, just lastly, Julie, is there anything else of particular interest about this RAP award? I mean, it seems like a great opportunity and especially helpful just being selected with this first tranche of awards.
Well, I think what I would just add is that we're really appreciative of USDA and the administration looking at the fact that ag really needed some ongoing support to keep markets moving, to help growers ensure that they can meet the opportunities and challenges that they're facing. So this program is tremendously timely, I think, right now. And the other thing I would just comment on is I think the award we received is reflective of the fact that we're always very strategic and thorough in the way we approach these markets. I think USDA is very confident in the way the industry approaches these types of programs. So I would say that the award truly reflects the fact that we're doing things in a very, knowledge-based, comprehensive way, and we've been delivering results, and that's what I think USDA recognizes as well.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. And to start us out, Russell, tell us about the Conservationist of the Year and what goals you would like to see occur this year.
So this is continuing work as the Certified Crop Advisor Conservationist of the Year. They're looking for certified crop advisors who are trying to aid farmers in getting information or conservation practices. One thing we've identified that is keeping farmers from getting conservation practices is actually just information and products. The current federal regulations actually were written in the 1950s. And at that time, those rules were only restricting fertilizers and pesticides. They didn't put into account other developing technologies such as plant biostimulants and some of these newer technologies we're using in agriculture. And so for 2024, our goal is to really help change the laws that are impacting biostimulant regulation to allow them to be used and treated as a fertilizer, not as a pesticide.
So what does that process look like to go through that and get that change to be where it needs to be?
Well, actually, there's a very long on-ramp. We've been working on this since 2014. And the bricks that we've laid on this path are now hopefully being included in the Farm Bill. So more than anything now, it's just supporting the work we've already done, trying to get legislators aware of the problem and hopefully enact those rules. There's an act right now by California regulators. It's called the Plant Biostimulant Act. And so the best thing that farmers can do is call up and say, hey, we support this language. This is going to give us more tools to enact those conservation practices and have more products available to us.
Thank you, Russell. To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Producers are keeping up the pace of planting despite storms. Gary Crawford has more.
In spite of a lot of stormy weather across the country,
producers are managing to keep up with 5-year average numbers on planting, and warm weather in behind that planting is keeping emergence and development pretty much ahead of schedule.
USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says this past week we saw what he calls respectable numbers for corn and soybeans. Looking at corn, 89% of the crop is planted.
That is 1 point ahead of the 5-year average.
Corn emergence dead on the 5-year average of 58%. And as for the planting number for beans,
the national number on May 26th, 68% planted, 5 points ahead of the 5-year average of 63%.
And the soybean emergence number?
39% emerged on May 26th, 5-year average 36%.
So as Brad said earlier,
in spite of almost daily thunderstorms in some areas,
producers still making good progress getting beans and corn planted and established. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.